Welcome to Whisperer of Madness. If you're enjoying the story, consider liking the video and subscribing. It really helps grow the channel and this community. Sudden entry battles between potions masters depended most on their accumulated knowledge and recipes. For instance, had Leyland not recognized the type of potion that the green-skinned barbarian was using, it might have been a hindrance to him. The winner was determined by who managed to see through the other party's setup. When it came to all this information, how could the green-skinned barbarian match up to Leyland, who possessed the AI chip? The opposite green-skinned barbarian's fingers began to shake, evidently in fear. What? Are you planning to use the star-traced amulet and activate the icy frost potion above your waist, or are you going to use the corrosive poison arrow potion at your back? Leyland measured up this green-skinned barbarian, obviously ridiculing it. Oh, no, I think you're doing this as a cover for you to activate your wind spirit's fury under your feet. All sorts of expressions crossed the opposite green-skinned barbarian's face, and it was truly difficult for it to have so many expressions and movements on his creased face. At the end, all this turned into terror. "Ah, you're the devil, the green-skinned potion master yelled, and actually abandoned his race and companions, fleeing from the battle area first. It evidently had a very high status here. After seeing it flee, the other green-skinned barbarians were startled, and with some of them shouting at the top of their voices, they rapidly left the area. "Good job!" Robin, who was not far away, revealed a smile. He was the strongest of the three of them, and the opposite gray-robed Magus could only fend for himself. Kesha, who was on the other side, was not so lucky. When she had chosen her opponent, she had had no AI chip and depended on her judgment. She had actually chosen the barbarian bear shaman, which was likely at the crystal phase. This barbarian bear shaman not only had unimaginable strength, but also a tough body. Even Kesha's Eye of Petrification could only hold it for a second and had no other effect. Rank 1 or 2 spells that struck it would char the fur, but there would be no substantial harm. As for rank 3 spells, not only were such models difficult to get a hold of, to use them in the Forgotten Land required that one pay a huge price. Not everyone was a potions grandmaster like Leyland, who could use potions to simulate the effects of a rank 3 spell. Woo-woo. At this moment, the skeleton flag on barbarian bear shaman's back suddenly exploded, sounding like a bugle horn. Ow, ow. The surrounding barbarian bears who heard these sounds immediately roared frantically, eyes turning blood red and their offensive abilities increasing by a large amount. Noah and the other warlocks were immediately at a disadvantage. They're entering a frenzied state. Even regular barbarian bears are affected. How about that one? Leyland immediately shifted his attention to the barbarian bear shaman. Along with the sounds of the horn, the barbarian bear abruptly roared towards the skies, slapping its chest. Thick veins that were like old tree roots occupied its hands, chest, and back. Ka-cha! The skull of this barbarian bear cracked open, revealing a muscle similar to a brain that was beginning to glow with warmth. Ow! Under its crazed roar, this barbarian bear shaman's body began to expand. Its body that was about 2 floors high became taller, turning into a gigantic humanoid bear-shaped monster. Energy undulations typically produced by crystal phase magi burst out from the body of this giant barbarian bear. Crystal phase! Kesha looked pained. The barbarian bear monster obviously did not care about that. With its paw that could cover the heavens, it swiped at her. Under this terrifying might, the air seemed to solidify and began to attack Kesha. With a boom, Kesha's figure was sent flying, slamming into numerous buildings. Explosive fireball! Countless giant fireballs exploded on the barbarian bear's head, but the groove with what seemed to be a brain was not the least bit damaged. All these attacks successfully incited the fury of the barbarian bear monster and attracted its attention elsewhere. Kesha, how is it? Are you dead yet? Who asks questions like that? Bricks exploded, and Kesha's figure appeared. However, she was not in a very good condition. Her clothes were tattered beyond repair, revealing dense snake scales. Kesha was now in her snake form, and not only did her chem-in scales cover her entire body, even her pupils had elongated and turned vertical. Even with the most powerful defensive form of giant chem-in serpent warlocks, there was a huge wound on her arm and it was slightly twisted. Even her bones had issues. I used a diversion technique and shifted most of the attack to my left hand. Kesha revealed her mangled left arm and smiled wryly as she explained. I didn't expect that barbarian bear to be so fierce. It's very dangerous today. To be defeated by a creature that used brute force and its physique, it was a huge blow to her. Leyland smiled wryly and quickly pulled Kesha aside, dodging a large black foot. Boom. The building from before was smashed, leaving behind a gigantic footprint. What we need to consider right now is how to get away from them. Besides, the support troops and magi who we attracted before are coming this way. The traps we set up can't hold them for too long, so we need a plan. Leyland quickly told Kesha, his words reaching Robin, who was a distance away. Ow! At this moment, the giant barbarian bear monster was already destroying everything, whether it was its ally, the green-skinned barbarian, fallen magi, warlocks of the Ouroboros clan, or even barbarian bear warriors. All were attacked without distinction. Ah! A black Horal snake warlock was grasped in the palm of the gigantic barbarian bear monster and produced miserable shrieks of fear. You monster, die! His facial muscles twisted as he yelled, terrifying rays converging in his hands and turned into a large axe striking down at it. Ka-cha, the axe, which had the terrifying might of a rank 3 spell, made contact with the monster's chest and actually produced sparks. Boom, boom. The barbarian bear monster took 2 steps back, shook its head, and continued roaring. With a swing of its arm, it threw the rank 3 black Horal snake warlock into its mouth and began to chew. Gachai, gachai, flesh, blood, organs, and bones slid out from its mouth. The might of those jaws, as well as its physique and sharp teeth, turned the barbarian bear monster's mouth into a grinder, turning the warlock into minced meat. Oh no, Alfredo! Noah screamed. It looked like yet another warlock from his family had died, while Robin's expression turned as gloomy as dark waters. When he saw a few rays about to catch up to them, his eyes revealed a steely determination. Quick, get into the pocket dimension. I'll bring up the rear. He opened up his hand. Illusory terror. Formless thin lines like a large web trapped all the human gray-robed magi within. There were even all sorts of strange laughter being produced in the air. After that, he stood in front of the giant barbarian bear monster and helped Noah and the others stall for time. The seal spell formation is completed. At this moment, a warlock who had been by the dark river called out. A scarlet rune launched from his finger and entered the whirlpool of the underground dark river. Pila, a giant blue web, immediately appeared on the surface of the river. Open. Leyland's eyes flickered with blue rays, his meteor sword streaking across with a strange arc and slashing at the web. Black light flashed, and the blue web immediately broke apart, revealing the black entrance to the pocket dimension in the whirlpool behind it. Quick, quick, quick! Hurry up! Many warlocks immediately jumped into the whirlpool and immediately disappeared with silver spatial rays. Senior Robin, let's go. Leyland slashed at the area with the meteor sword, and terrifying chem-in toxins appeared once more before he unhesitatingly jumped into the whirlpool. Ow! The giant barbarian bear monster's eyes glinted with intelligence, and it charged towards Robin in a frenzy. What a pity! This is something I only just got my hands on. Robin took a look at the monster and tossed a black ball at it. Pack. Countless vines appeared in midair, with green shoots and leaves that formed a large green web that trapped it within. Ball of binding. This is a one-time use magic object passed down from ancient times. Even crystal phase magi will be held back for at least a minute. Robin sighed, and then jumped into the whirlpool. Silver-white rays flashed, and he disappeared. At this moment, a few splendid rays charged to the camp and the lights vanished, revealing the forms of a few people who looked terrible. Douglas, stop, you idiot! A barbarian bear with golden fur immediately went forward and roared using a unique method. This roaring was at a specific frequency that prevented the monster from moving. Looks like someone broke into the pocket dimension. I smell the disgusting scent of warlock blood. The green-skinned barbarian leader's nose twitched, and he concluded confidently. The Ouroboros clan, even they have to abide by our rules in the Forgotten Land. Together with these 2 magi was a human Magus, with a strange brand on his face that seemed like some kind of symbol. The sun's child, so what now? Do we continue our chase? Upon hearing the howl of the barbarian bear, the huge monster had already returned to its original state and was currently lying on the floor, depressed. Or we could simply destroy this entrance. The golden-furred barbarian bear proposed. Are you mad? It would be a waste to destroy such a good pocket dimension. Nobody will agree to it. The green-skinned barbarian shook his head and continued. Besides, those magi can completely escape from other small cracks. This is such a silly plan. The barbarian bear groaned coldly, revealing a big flag on his back. All right. Currently we are allies and we need to discuss as to how we will handle our enemies, said the human Magus, as he was stuck in between the green-skinned barbarian and the barbarian bear. What else can we do? If we have no intentions of letting our enemies mindlessly plunder from our pocket dimension, then we must send people in. But you've seen their strength. We'd be sending them to their deaths. The green-skinned barbarian's eyes flashed with a tinge of helplessness. Then we'll have to deploy hydro and crystal phase magi. In the worst-case scenario, we just abandon our bases. First, we must gather our men here, the human chief replied. Since you said so. The green-skinned barbarian and barbarian bear chiefs looked at each other. Then it's settled. We will immediately send out the signal. Is this the pocket dimension that was established by quicksand in ancient times? Leyland said while standing on a huge plane that, every now and then, emitted wisps of fog. Leyland looked at the statistics gathered by the AI chip and nodded his head. From this mapping of energy particles, the concentration here is almost the same as that of the outside world. There isn't any impact to spells anymore. During the battle at the underground river, Leyland and the other magi could not use their entire strength because of the lack of energy particles. But it was different here. Of course, there were always two sides to a coin. With this concentration, even the crystal phase magi of the other side would have their strengths restored as well, and become free of restraints. Robin's silhouette slowly emerged as silver rays of light flashed. He looked at his surroundings and his expression lit up. Wonderful. These are the purple plains, which are not very far from the magi buildings in the center. Where do you intend to go? If we have different targets to plunder, we need to separate here. He asked Leyland and Kesha for their opinions. Of course. I want to go to the core of the magi buildings, Leyland said with a know-it-all look on his face. The Lamia hair was likely to be kept in the core of the pocket dimension. Why would he go to other places? Me too, Kesha followed. Each pocket dimension had its own set of rules, and the resources were most plentiful at its core. Furthermore, the ruins of magi are there, so there definitely would be storerooms and laboratories inside, making it the most sought-after place. That's good then. We shall go to the ruins of the central continent together, then split and start our mission when we arrive. Robin nodded his head. In any case, the ruins there are expansive, and we can't say for sure we won't run into. There could still be remaining magi and other creatures from the previous 3 forces that dwelled in the pocket dimension, and not to mention the possibility of armies chasing after them. They ought to move as a group to achieve better security to prevent any mishaps. To make full use of time, Robin immediately announced the start of the mission. Although they had lost 2 men in their lineup, the remaining 10 shot out blazing rays of light from their pupils, which transformed into 10 black streaks that pierced through the horizon. Bang! A green-skinned barbarian Magus was thrown to the ground with no light in his eyes. His forehead had a massive and terrifying hole in it, and one could faintly see a portion of his brain. But it was already thoroughly destroyed and looked like a lump of starch paste. This green-skinned barbarian Magus originally had rank 2 strength, but because his brain was damaged and he did not deploy a clone seed beforehand, he was actually doomed to die. As his body twitched, the flames of his life were slowly extinguished. Kesha, who was beside him, took out a gold-trimmed handkerchief and cleaned her hands of the brain remnants. I've already extracted fragments of his memory. He is a sage of the green-skinned barbarians. This time, he came to gather potion materials and resources. According to his memory, we did not deviate far from our original path, and we are almost at the core of the pocket dimension, the quicksand ruins, she told a bunch of magi near her. Their faces flashed with delight upon those words. They had taken about 2 days to get to their current location. All this time, they had not only encountered scattered members of the 3 forces, there were also hydro-phase magi on their tails with orders to kill. That troop, under the lead of a crystal phase Magus, had unhesitantly chased after their group. Luckily, being warlocks whose strength exceeded their levels, Leyland's group had been able to fight them and flee whenever they met, but this had still caused a deviation from their original plans. Go there as quickly as possible, find what we need and immediately get out. Our traps will not be able to hold them off for long. Robin's expression sank. The small squads at the back could only grit their teeth and carry on with the mission with no time to rest, not to mention any time to find resources. Even if a trap was put in place again, with the add-on of Leyland's spectacular skills, and the difficulty in successfully confining multiple rank 3 magi, the effects would not last very long. Even their whereabouts would be known to their enemies. After entering the pocket dimension, their ultimate goal was to reach the quicksand ruins in the central continent. Leyland and company had never tried to conceal this fact, or rather, they couldn't. The fiery, blazing sun shone in the sky, scorching everything. Although this was merely a projection of the sun of another realm, the terrible heat waves were still rising constantly, clambering up the surrounding temperature. Leyland had draped himself with a white cloak and was standing in a large desert. There was only yellow sand as far as the eye could see. Not even a cactus could be seen, not to mention other plants and animals. It was a scene of death. Although this is a desert, the atmosphere and environment here are out of the norm. Leyland grabbed a handful of sand, and its boiling heat spread to the center of his palm. This kind of temperature is easily beyond 100 degrees. Leave alone animals or plants. Even a group of acolytes or rank 1 magi cannot stand this terrible place for too long. He opened his palm, letting the boiling sand slip through his fingers. Furthermore, this terrain is giving off a peculiar vibe. It seems to be from an ancient life form. Did you notice it too? Robin walked up to Leyland as he asked. Apparently, there are traces of some kind of ancient life form that lived here once, and they have a characteristic of blazing heat. He said with a firm nod of his head. Large-scale environmental changes like these, made subconsciously by the ancient life forms, were scaringly similar to those by Breaking Dawn Magi. I've heard a rumor. Among the ancient quicksand organization, there was once the son of a famous bloodline warlock who safely returned to his ancestors and really became the ancient sun's child. Robin looked at the vast desert and could not bear to sigh with sorrow. We can't say for sure, but if that sun's child was here before and cast his power. The ancient sun's child. Leyland's face changed slightly as he scanned through the database of the AI chip. This was not just a simple bloodline creature. Its flames could burn in a vacuum, twisting the concepts of time. Even in some small worlds, the sun seen is not the actual fixed burning star, but in fact a grown sun's child. In the event of a sun child leaving the small world, it would bring great disaster to that place. Relax! Even if the sun's child surpassed Breaking Dawn Magi and entered the unpredictable rank 7, he would have probably died long ago during the ancient war. Robin seemed to have confidence, and Leyland nodded his head in agreement. Although ancient magi were incomparably strong, their enemies, too, knew the rules of survival, and could even wipe out certain magi via these rules. Once somebody falls during the war, there was no possibility for them to survive. Even if they cloned their bodies as a backup, it was no use because it would decay the second the main body dies. Even if the sun's child surpassed the strength of the morning star Magus, it would be dreadful if he was made to enlist and die during battle. Everything takes its own course. Even one as strong as the sun cannot escape the fate of death, Leyland sighed. So it is uncertain if rank 9 magi will be able to reach immortality. This was his highest pursuit and his greatest ambition, a path to eternal life. Even if he attained the position of a rank 9 Magus in the highest realm, if he realized that he was unable to be immortal, he would still carry on with his journey, without the slightest hesitation, looking for all hope and opportunities. Leyland's pupils burned with desire, but he quickly concealed it. We've arrived, shouted Robin, who was at the front. Chem, let's take a look. Robin and Leyland looked at each other and walked to the front. After kicking a small sand dune over, they spotted a huge, black, ancient castle, peacefully standing on its own amidst the yellow desert. The rising heat waves caused the castle to look like an oasis, a scene from a dream. But they could only see a small portion of it, and were able to roughly gauge the size of the ancient castle. We're here. There are traces of magi here. Quicksand Castle. Robin laughed out loud. And surrounding the ancient castle, there were a few people working on temporary construction. A few barbarian bears, green-skinned barbarians, and human magi forming a harmonious group. At certain times, there were magi setting off alone, changing into flowy rays of light and entering the ancient castle. Defeat a small white bird landed, and Kesha opened her shut eyes. From the energy fluctuations at that end, they have, at most, a hydrophase Magus overseeing them. What do we do? Even though they have received some information related to us, it isn't too risky to just barge in. We still have to obtain some sort of guide or map of the area to explore it, though. Robin let out a deep sigh. My subordinates only acquired a part of the information about the outermost region. They have no clue as to the internal structure of Quicksand Castle. Even if it's a trap, the opponent's teams have been trapped in the sculptured spell formation. Even if there was a trap set up, they would not have much manpower. Leyland stoked his chin as he stated this assumption. In that case, we have nothing to be afraid of. Robbins laughed sardonically. Having been chased after by their opponents for such a long time, almost to the extent of being chased out of the pocket dimension, he held a lot of pent-up anger, a sentiment more or less shared by every other warlock present. Pooh! A scaly hand suddenly extended outwards from emptiness and grabbed the chest of a barbarian bear warrior, gouging out a still-throbbing bright red heart. Drops of fresh blood that had yet to lose their warmth dripped down unceasingly, causing the surrounding magi to be scared stiff. Ah, a beautiful, short death. A black Horal snake warlock robed in black squeezed out of a crack in the shadows, his face revealing a mesmerized expression. Magi could, more or less, be considered mentally ill, and warlocks were no exception. Previously, they had been restricted from acting by the royal bloodlines, but now there was no such thing. Once the orders for an attack were given, the alliance went into complete chaos as 6 black Horal snake warlocks, together with Noah, massacred every Magus in sight, regardless of rank. Even acolytes were not spared. That tragedy had caused some magi to flee. Boom! The central building exploded. 3 magi with gloomy expressions floated in midair, their bodies emanating the terrifying energy of hydrophase magi. "Launch the spells!" the one at the center shouted. A ring of fluorescent light flickered and large runes formed a steel cage, firmly securing the entire campsite within. "I knew you had some tricks up your sleeves, but where are your hydrophase and crystal phase magi? Have they all died?" Just when the 3 hydrophase magi were about to go forth to stop them, a spark exploded out of the darkness. Robin, along with Leyland and Kesha, stepped out to block them with a sneer. There were no morning star magi in the Forgotten Land. Even the major powers of the region, like the barbarian bears, had few crystal phase magi. To deploy a small team to hunt after Leyland's team was the most they could do without their tribe leaders. Even for that, they had to give up on many strategic locations. Were this team to be trapped, this alliance in the pocket dimension would have their overall strength greatly reduced. After all, this group of magi was only exploring the place. Nobody had expected them to invade. A mere 1 at the hydro phase and 2 at the vapor phase. I, Dominic, will ensure that none of you leave this place today. The human Magus, who wore black robes with a cross-shaped floral pattern on his face, charged forward as hydro phase spiritual force surged forth like a tsunami. "Oh, really? But in the eyes of us royal warlocks, you are like a lamb to be slaughtered." Robin's eyes showed a tinge of arrogance, and a horrifyingly intimidating strength erupted fiercely from his body. The same happened with Leyland and Kesha. Rank 3 innate spell, Intimidating Gaze. This was the formidable spell that high-level rank 3 warlocks could master. Moreover, even the strength of this spell in the hands of rank 3 black Horal snake warlocks could not compare to when Leyland and party used it, even if they had trained in the same spell. This deterrent strength was entirely attributed to the bloodline. The more concentrated the bloodline, the stronger its ancient roots, the more powerful the effect of intimidation would be. Rank 3 spell formation, the domain of unity. The bodies of the 3 began to glow, the light merging to form a strange triangular diagram. Under the effects of the spell, the dreadful force fields the 3 of them emitted actually started to indistinctly complement each other and increase in intensity, forming a force similar to that of the domain of a true morning star Magus. Waves of hissing howls arose, those of ancient predatory giant Chemian serpents. Space vibrated endlessly, and a more than 1,000-meter tall phantom of a giant serpent appeared. The serpent opened its amber eyes and stared straight at the 3 magi ahead of it, making them break out in cold sweat. A real domain should possess 3 basic attributes: weaken the enemy, strengthen the self, and bend fundamental laws. Leyland had a deep understanding regarding his own domain, all thanks to the large amounts of information hidden in the library of the Ouroboros clan. The terror of an individual giant chem, In Serpent can at most weaken its enemies. When we cooperate, the terrifying force fields we generate complement and amplify each other. In an instant, he saw the actions of the opposing magi slow down. The acolytes fainted while rank 1 magi could barely move. Rank 2 and 3 magi could move and even cast spells, but their strength had been greatly reduced. On the contrary, the black Horal snake warlocks had an abrupt increase in their aura, to the extent that they could compare to the vapor phase now. Under Noah's lead, the low-ranked magi unscrupulously massacred the camp. After combination, our powers now both weaken the enemy and strengthen our allies. What a pity that we cannot bend laws, else it would have been a terrifying true domain. Leyland could feel the terrifying force field adding to his powers. An indescribable aura entered his body, exciting his bloodline to a boil and pushing his power to that of the hydro phase. Kesha's situation was similar to his, but what shocked everyone the most was Robin's transformation. As the core of this combination, he had received the greatest amplification of power. His aura increased non-stop and began to terrify even Leyland. Only Lucian had managed to inspire such emotion in him previously. Supplemented by the innate gift of 3 giant Chemian serpent warlocks, Robin had already neared the threshold of the crystal phase. With the addition of his bloodline's strength, he had completely stepped into the crystal phase in power. This terrifying force field, you are all giant Chemian serpent warlocks. The human Magus, Dominic, squinted his eyes, his body trembling. The reports had only mentioned that a group of rank 3 warlocks had invaded the pocket dimension. Because Leyland and the other 3 had only used their innate poison spells when they entered, and not this terrifying force field, the Magi had underestimated them. Even if they were rank 3 warlocks, the Black Horal Snake bloodline and the giant Chemian Serpent bloodline were in completely different leagues. Their strengths were poles apart. Giant Chemian Serpent warlocks were very rare, and typically never strayed out of the Ouroboros clan headquarters where they were well protected. The human Magus had not expected the presence of so many giant Chemian Serpent warlocks in this infiltrating party. He could feel a portion of the spiritual force in his sea of consciousness being locked. His inability to use it caused his expression to change to one of bitterness. A little over 10 minutes later, the massacre on the ground had come to an end. Limbs and flesh were strewn about everywhere. Noah and the 9 remaining Black Horal Snake warlocks had not suffered any injuries, but their clothes had been dyed dark red. The battle in the sky, too, had reached its climax. Ophidian Na! Robin had grown even more terrifying, having activated his Chemian scales defense. The intricate black scales that covered him were smooth yet elegant, and there were even faint patterns on the surface, forming a complete rune the color of blood. He howled, and numerous streams of black air congealed into a large black phantom snake that swallowed a huge barbarian bear. A cringeworthy sound of gnawing was emitted. Several seconds later, there was no longer a hint there of the existence of a barbarian bear shaman. Shadow Cage! Leyland, meteor sword in hand, combed the area. From time to time, he would cast a few spells which caused the green-skinned barbarian Magus opposite him to retreat slowly. Boom. At that time, a hidden trap burst out from behind the green-skinned barbarian Magus, morphing into a cage of shadows that trapped the barbarian within. Die! Leyland rushed forward, his quick steps containing the elegance of a dancer. His sword slashed across the neck of the green-skinned barbarian. Green blood spurted out as a head flew across the sky. AAH! The human Magus let out a startling cry and distanced himself from Kesha, morphing into a ray of light that streaked into the distance. The cage from before had immediately made an opening for him as he neared. You need my permission to leave. Just as the Magus was going to rush out of the cage, a black palm blocked his path. Robin made his way there with a smile. Leyland and Kesha tailed behind him and blocked his retreat. Upon seeing that scenario, the Magus smiled wryly and put up both his hands in an act of surrender. What now? The surrendered Magus immediately fell to the ground and fainted. Robin looked anxiously at Kesha. Even though the opponent was very cooperative, but it is extremely troublesome to scour through a rank 3 Magus. Memories. Kesha opened both her eyes, her face revealing an exhausted expression. Quicksand Castle, I have already checked the maps and the symbols thoroughly. The copies he gave were real. It is exactly the same as in his memory. That's good. Leyland glanced at Dominic, who was lying dead on the ground, whose sea of consciousness was still sealed. What do we do with him? Throw the body out. He only cooperated because of the promise to spare his life. Robin spoke indifferently, as if talking about garbage. Every word and action of a rank 3 Magus carried with it a terrifying energy. Hence, the pacts they made, even if mere verbal agreements, would be like binding. Of course, to Robin and Leyland, Dominic was no threat. Therefore, whether he was killed or spared made little difference to the bigger picture. All right then. Kesha summoned a yellow sand puppet which lifted Dominic from the ground and ran off to a distance. Now, let's take a look at the arrangements in the quicksand castle. After occupying the original camp, Leyland and company chose one of the rooms and assembled together. They spread out a map on a big round table. This was what the coward Dominic had handed over. It had been retrieved from memory and tested for authenticity, so it was credible. The structure of the huge castle was laid bare on this yellow parchment, surrounded by plain white barring a few outer areas that were marked with clearer symbols. Amongst those were many areas marked as rank 3 danger zones. This clearly showed that only rank 3 magi with their capabilities could explore this place. Average rank 1 or rank 2 magi would only be courting their own deaths if they attempted to advance there. Leyland and the other magi looked on with intense attention, memorizing the map completely. Based on the accumulated information from ancient times, not only are there plenty of illusions and traps here, the routes and defenses constantly change with the passage of time, rendering any work of mapping the traps useless. Currently, there are 3 routes that are safe for travel. Robin pointed on the map and explained. They are the main door, the first window sill, and the rooftop which contain the flaw of the defensive spell formation. Which one will you choose? After reaching this point, the team was basically going to split. Leyland, just like the rest of them, had his own agenda in mind and hoped not to travel with the rest. This way, he would be able to protect his secrets. I intend to start from the rooftop which had the weakest entry point. Kesha took the lead and decided, the 3 warlocks from my clan shall follow me. I will take the main door then. Although the rooftop might contain good natural resources, the main door is much safer. Robin chuckled. Noah and the rest of the 3 warlocks said nothing. It seemed like they followed Robin willingly. So I'll. Leyland parted his lips and was about to reply. Leyland, why don't you join me? Kesha invited. I know you are looking for Lamia hair. If we find it, you'll get priority. Lamia hair was very precious, so for Kesha to make such a comment showed the great extent of her goodwill for him. Join you? Leyland lowered his head in thoughts. Of course there were benefits, especially in the face of enemy troops and when facing multiple traps. In turn, though, it would create many troubles for him. He still had some strategies up his sleeves that he had not divulged as yet because the time was not right. Sorry, he smiled apologetically. It's nothing. Kesha smiled, as if she didn't care too. All right, let's move out after we have decided on our routes. I do not wish to be chased out again. Robin exclaimed and immediately left the room with Noah and the other 3. In this excursion, both Leyland and Kesha had not suffered much loss. However, Robin had lost 2 of his rank 3 subordinates, something which left him in regret. He felt a sense of urgency to search for more resources to make up for his losses. Kesha and Leyland nodded their heads in agreement and quickly left the place. The entire camp was left in a deathly silence. Remaining behind was the blood that had seeped into the ground and the wreckage, remnants of the violence that had taken place. Shoo! A few hours after Leyland and company had entered the depths of the ancient castle, a few rays of dazzling brilliance shone over from the horizon. They faded out to reveal the figures of the magi of the various tribes. In the arms of one of the women was the unconscious Dominic. This whole camp is completely abandoned. Kulam and Akamu are most likely dead. Seeing the ruins on the camp, many of the high-ranking magi had to constrain their rage. Kulam is fine. He prepared a clone seed long ago. The regeneration itself will take place in our clan, an old green-skinned barbarian announced. If not for the fact that this cloning process causes huge exhaustion of his spiritual force, it would have been difficult to defeat him. Not true, another barbarian bear shaman who had a dull expression remarked. Within this camp, out of the 3 hydro-phase magi, one was in a coma and the other still had a clone seed. Only the hydro-phase barbarian bear shaman was truly dead. The barbarian bear clan specialized in physical strength. As for the spells and such, they drew support and strength from the totem, so naturally they did not have many methods of keeping their lives safe. They were also rather rigid in thoughts, unwilling to bend over and surrender like the humans. I can feel the power of the crystal phase. Based on Akamu's ability, only with such strength could they have wiped them out in such short order. The barbarian bear shaman roared loudly. What do we do now? The female Magus eyes met the green-skinned barbarian. Give chase. I can smell them. They have intentionally split up. The barbarian bear shaman's eyes grew bloodshot, looking horrifying. Those who dare to murder those of my clan will pay dearly. I will act personally and place their heads at our altar to suffer eternal damnation. It looked exceptionally furious indeed. The female Magus shuddered in cold sweat. She had heard about such curses. It was said that the enemy's head would be chopped off and placed on the altar, and the power of the totem would inflict eternal torture. Some rumors stated that the soul of the Magus would also be imprisoned inside the skull to suffer the eternal cruelty. This was the barbarian bear's most wicked punishment, and it looked like this time it was going to be put to use. For these different tribes to survive in this forgotten land, they have to stay united, hence their troop cohesiveness is very high. The female Magus sighed. Comparatively, for the human alliance, which was made up mainly by the disloyal and traitorous, their alliance was very strong and solid, but sadly there was no unity. Thus, their combined strength was less than those of the barbarian bears and green-skinned barbarians. Let's split up 3 ways and move forward. The green-skinned barbarian nodded his head in agreement. These 3 powerful individuals had met and formed an alliance for the pocket dimension. Although there was some semblance of unity amongst them, the bond was rather weak. Not too long ago, even they had been at loggerheads for sole ownership of the plane. Thus, to act independently was a wise choice. The Magus whose is pestered by the spirit of Akamu chose the main door. I can feel it. I'm going after him. The barbarian bear shaman hastened his steps and immediately moved forward. I will choose the rooftop, the old green-skinned barbarian added. With a hunched back that looked like it might break any time, he held out crutches made of solid gold and precious gems and flew upwards. You! The female Magus shook her head. She stomped her feet and headed towards the windowsill. At this moment, Leyland was unaware that the enemy troops had caught up with them and were just outside the vicinity. He was looking around the room curiously. It looked like a bedroom. The floor area was very small with only a bed, a table, a chair, and a bookshelf, with nothing else present. The wooden planks inside the house had turned a brownish yellow. Cobwebs and piles of dust covered the corners. On the whole, it seemed like a regular abandoned bedroom. Leyland walked to the bookshelf and started reading the titles on the spines of the books. 57 Ways to Brew Apple Wine, Ways to Capture Molten Bugs, The World A General Discussion. There were many odd genres of books stacked neatly together, something that amazed Leyland. He held himself back and refused to touch any of them. Such ancient Magus castles had already absorbed unquantifiable radiation from the previous residents over the years. There might have been a terrifyingly powerful Magus as well, or the sun's child. The castle had probably undergone terrifying changes. Leave alone the structure and essence. At this point, it might even have manifested some bizarre phenomena. Some of those phenomena could not be explained even by the original owner, hence they could prove to be even more deadly. Ancient magi had been known to make good use of these as defense networks and build a large numbers of traps. Exploring magi had previously touched these items in the house and were drawn into a deep, mysterious space, completely lost to the world. Even well-known magi who had great status, too, met the same fate of death. Many magi were fearful of the terrifying outcome, therefore they would not act blindly without thinking. According to Dominic's report, I have to wait for another 3 minutes before the door can be opened. Leyland stood outside the bedroom door. His eyes stared coldly at the brass handle and his expressionless face looked serious. On the wall, a clock was slowing, ticking away. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The needles were moving very slowly. It seemed like the world had moved for 5 seconds and the clock only 1. With so many odd and unexplainable environmental influences, many magi made the mistake of telling the wrong time. If it weren't for Leyland's AI chip, he might have fallen into the same trap. It is time. Leyland watched attentively at the AI chip's stopwatch. The moment the needle reached 0, he grabbed the handle immediately and opened the door. Boom. Distant echoes could be heard in the corridor. Leyland looked to the ground and saw that the bright red carpet lined on the floor was spotless without traces of dust. Beautiful chandeliers hung from the ceiling, emitting a yellow radiance. Leyland turned his head around. The original room was nowhere to be seen. not even a single trace of it remaining. What was left was just a blank, empty wall. This must be the illusionary corridor, and this also means that I have entered into the second level of the castle. Ecological Garden Leyland looked into the information the AI chip had previously recorded. The three powers had been hanging around for a long time, and they had definitely obtained a few useful items. Based on Dominic's information, Quicksand Castle was far larger than it looked on the outside. It was practically a gigantic maze. The numerous rooms outside were the first layer of defense. If they did not leave on time, they would travel through countless rooms and later be trapped inside till their death. The mark of the second layer would first be this illusory corridor. With the dim yellow lighting, Leyland looked through the decorations in the corridor. The two walls were mostly white, with some strange patterns of flowers and plants, but there were no portraits of humans. The red carpet on the ground extended until the end of the corridor, with not a speck of dust in sight. This drawing technique, Leyland touched his chin. It has the style of the ancient era. Looks like it is one of Quicksand's experimentation areas. The strength of the current Magi could not compare to that of ancient times. Leyland even suspected that Magi at the Morning Star realm or higher had even participated in the construction of this place. As a mere rank 3 Warlock, a slight misstep could take away his life. Leyland glanced at the oil paintings in the corridor vigilantly. He started advancing in a strange pace. The flower patterns on the two sides began to move in tune to his step. They began to grow, germinate, blossom, and then wilt, creating a cycle. Rumors have it that the illusory corridor can only be entered with a unique walking frequency. It possesses a strange force that can send a person to any place he would like to go to. Leyland remembered this passage, as well as the account at the end. If there are errors in one's footwork, the illusory corridor will turn into a life-threatening trap, trapping both their body and soul. This specific footstep was discovered through the huge sacrifice from the Magi on the outside, which now made things convenient for Leyland's group. What exactly do I want? Leyland strolled along the corridor and constantly asked himself. A unique feature of the corridor was that if one did not have a clear desire, there would be no end. After a specific period of time, the same mechanism would activate. Immortality, strength, and all that would be too vague and exceed the abilities of the illusory corridor. I can only mention a place it can communicate with. Leyland muttered to himself. It's not safe to directly say the location of the Lamia hair. If such a material doesn't exist, the illusory corridor will instantly regard me as an intruder. This was a test for all who entered. The true owner definitely knew what was at the end of the corridor. The teleportation of the corridor would only work within the castle. The moment Leyland mentioned an area that did not match what was inside, not only would there be no teleportation, but defensive spell formations would be activated instead. However, he was unwilling to give up on the Lamia hair. I would like to go to a place that will help my bloodline mature. A moment later, Leyland made up his mind and constantly repeated this line in his thoughts. In that instant, the corridor seemed to shrink and the flowery patterns on the walls sped up. In a few seconds, they completed a cycle of growth. A bit of light appeared at the end of the corridor, constantly expanding. Let's go! Leyland gritted his teeth and calmly headed ahead. Swoosh. The feeling of weightlessness during the teleportation left him feeling dizzy. Shaking his head vigorously, he took stock of his surroundings. Where is this? He was in a large laboratory. He could see plants outside through the glass, as well as many glass vessels and experimental apparatus that were all neatly arranged inside. A lab, huh? My luck is pretty good. There's definitely going to be something here to help mature my bloodline faster. Leyland let out a long breath and immediately recalled the rumors regarding Quicksand. Given that their ranks consisted of warlocks of various bloodlines, they had a vested interest in the field. It would not be difficult to find something that could help his bloodline mature. Leyland arrived at a metal counter and pulled out the first drawer. It was messy, mostly made of thick parchments recording data from experiments. It was all in the Byron language. Leyland opened the other drawers, and the contents were about the same. There was mostly data from experiments, the counter practically filled by these documents. There is so much data, but it's a pity there's no information on the receptors and core data. There's no way to tell the procedure of the experiment at all. Leyland found this regretful, but quickly saved all the information to the database. Even if it was mostly unrelated data, it was still very valuable. Who knows, some of these parchments could even hold the data essential to repeating the experiment. In addition, with all its recent advances and improvement in its abilities, it took little time to record everything. Everything was organized neatly. It seemed like the Warlocks then had left in an orderly fashion, not leaving much behind. After recording the information, Leyland turned his attention to the ecological garden outside the giant glass wall. Large leaves that were like palm leaf fans covered the sky. Barely any sunlight shone down on the thick roots of the plants. It looked like a primordial forest. However, Leyland, who had experience from Twilight Zone, immediately realized the difference in this sunlight. This was not sunlight from the natural world, but an artificial recreation of heat and light. Though there was a similar effect, it lacked the harmony of nature. This place has probably been abandoned for thousands of years. To be able to let this ecological garden achieve a balance like this, it truly is a perfect system achieved with astonishing skill. Leyland sighed and touched the glass. Custom-made reinforced glass. Degree of hardness, 3. The AI chip concluded. A level 3 hardness meant that regular rank 3 warlocks would be unable to break this glass. Leyland's eyes brightened at this information. Looks like this place was used to hold many powerful creatures. A giant fireball appeared in Leyland's hands, the terrifying heat burning even the air around it into nothingness and searing through the void. Explosive fireball. Enormous flames smashed against the glass wall, the dazzle of the heat and light incomparably piercing. Even Leyland himself had to close his eyes temporarily. When he opened his eyes again, there was an indent in a part of the glass, but not much more. It still stood strong. As expected of a material with a hardness of level 3. Leyland sighed, as he could immediately tell how much power this reinforced glass could withstand. Based on the power of his attack, it needed to be used at least 10 times before he could completely shatter this glass wall. What for? He thought as he stroked his chin. While gathering information, he had also discovered an activating spell which should have been the key to entering the garden. The attack from before was purely to test how strong this laboratory was. Looks like there were at most rank 3 creatures here, so it's not too dangerous, Leyland was now assured. If not, the defense would not be so uncomplicated. Even if there were still spell formations that had yet to be activated, the creatures would still be around rank 3. He quickly arrived at an instrument that was like a disc. After checking it briefly, he found a groove and placed crystallized magic crystals inside, replacing the previous powder. After that, Leyland placed both hands atop the disc, rays traveling from his palms and connecting with the disc. Activate! Ka-cha, ka-cha. The entire glass wall began to shake, great amounts of dust and silt sliding off. Rumble. As it had not been activated for a long time, the mechanism seemed to be aged and produced a loud sound as a glass door opened. A crack appeared within the glass, expanding in 2 directions, bringing with it an unusually refreshing breeze. In that instant, Leyland felt every cell in his body dancing in joy, and his giant Chemian serpent bloodline beginning to stir. I didn't notice this before, but it seems like every plant in this ecological garden is an ancient species. Also, they're quite a few times larger than the species we have now, containing traits of the ancient era. Leyland walked out of the laboratory and looked backwards. The laboratory from before was like a giant white egg, set atop a thick stone base. Everything around it looked like a primordial forest. With such obvious traits of the ancient era, and given how lively my bloodline has become, this place is a perfect copy of that period, he determined. Though such an environment may have been the norm at the time. This is very valuable information. Leyland revealed an expression of excitement and immediately commanded, AI chip, record the parameters of the environment. Mission established, beginning scanning. Recording parameters of the atmosphere. The AI chip loyally intoned, following through on Leyland's command meticulously. After giving the order, Leyland walked along a giant plant root, meteor sword in hand. At the end of the root was a berry vine, and atop a leaf the size of a millstone, he found bite marks. An animal eating. Leyland looked at the mark on the leaf. It should be omnivorous. These marks are of teeth used to tear flesh. The plant was repairing itself rapidly, erasing all traces of the bites. They grow so quickly, which explains how this cycle was constructed here. Leyland touched his chin and came to the ground. At the root of the plant was a stinking thick green goop. Entering the nest shriek. Upon seeing the blood fluids, the blood vulture's eyes shot out rays of excitement as it started to shriek hysterically. A blood-colored glow shone from his body. Concurrently, large amounts of fresh blood spewed out of the snake-necked turtle's neck like water from a fountain. It coagulated in midair and eventually formed lumps of blood clot which were swallowed by the blood vulture. Rip. Soon after, the blood vulture stretched out its long, sharp black claws and easily lifted the shell of the snake-necked turtle. Using its claws, it separated the fresh flesh into segments of meat and started devouring the meat. His motions were smooth as he nonchalantly ate a snake-necked turtle in front of its counterparts. The majestic beast presented a perfect combination of grace and bloodshed. Moo-woo. As they watched their companion being brutally murdered, the rest of the snake-necked turtles mourned, but did not dare to take a step outside the lake. Leyland quietly watched this scene and maintained a neutral expression. That was but a common occurrence in the natural world. Before the advancement to a stage where one could survive purely based on the injection of energy, such predatory acts were not considered to be good or bad. Survival instincts were merely the rules of life, meant to be followed and respected. Its ability to control bloodline. On the contrary, Leyland was actually very interested in this specific ability of the blood vultures. Furthermore, differing from the snake-necked turtle, a mature blood vulture was at least at the standard of a rank 3, the minimum criteria to achieve the pure ancient blood. Leyland was extremely interested in the origins of these bloodline creatures. It's just, should I go? Leyland stroked his chin. The king blood vulture could be of morning star rank, and under its detection, Leyland's stealth spell would not be of any effect. However, should the king blood vulture still be of rank 3 status, even if it was at the apex of the crystal phase, Leyland would still be confident in his ability to conceal himself. The number of choices we humans have is very troublesome, Leyland thought. He sighed, feeling like he was at a crossroads in life, with a dense fog shrouding his destiny. In fact, this was a choice people would have come across many times in life in which their final choices can result in different outcomes, both good and bad. Do I go or not? Leyland debated with himself. Ring. Leyland tossed a dull golden coin and it landed on the back of his hand with the luckbird staring back at him. Even after a long while, the coin was not badly damaged, causing Leyland to heave a sigh of relief. Since the coin of destiny did not crack, this means that the blood vultures don't have a rank 4 in their midst. I can take my chances. Leyland's eyes burned with passion. The coin of destiny was Leyland's biggest accomplishment in Twilight Zone. It would, however, bring about huge misfortunes if it were to be utilized to predict the abilities of Morning Star Magi. But despite this flaw, it still benefited Leyland without a doubt. Since not a single crack appeared on the coin when he made the prediction, this suggested that there were no Morning Star beings blocking his path. That was good enough for him. Even if he used everything he had, he could not bridge the gap between himself and a Morning Star power. As long as the opponent was not at the Morning Star realm, Leyland was willing to take the risk. Chew. At this point in time, the blood vulture on the ground had already finished its meal. Leyland was stunned as he looked at the blood vulture fly into the sky with the remains of the snake-necked turtle in its mouth, as if it wanted to bring the remains back into its nest. This is my chance! Leyland's eyes flashed brightly as he initiated his shadow stealth. He concealed his figure in the crevices and stealthily entered the carcass of the snake-necked turtle. The wind howled unceasingly. The blood vulture took off at a high velocity. The friction created by the turbulence had caused sparks to be created with the corpse of the snake-necked turtle. Fortunately, the collision of airflow ceased after it reached a certain height. The blood vulture traveled at a high velocity, causing Leyland's view of the landscape below to be that of a blur. About 10 minutes later, they arrived at their destination. Leyland could barely hide the shocked expression on his face as he saw the huge shadows not far from him. Ahead of him was a huge mountain, solitary and upright. There was not a hint of vegetation. Instead, it gave off a dark glow that made it seem as if it was some kind of metal structure. Scattered all around were huge caves, of which blood vultures could be seen squawking in. They were synchronized in their cacophony. Not only were their penetrating screeches 10 times as strong as those of the individuals, they caused Leyland's chem-in bloodline to have a weird reaction, as if it was about to leave his body. Fortunately, this was just a momentary hallucination. Under the suppression of his vapor phase spiritual force, it disappeared without a trace. The blood vulture's ability to control bloodlines is truly terrifying, Leyland muttered. Furthermore, this ecological garden is far too vast and wide. Leyland developed doubts towards his previous judgment. Don't tell me that this place is not simply an ecological garden or a Magus garden, but a pocket dimension. A pocket dimension within another. Rumor had it that, among the various pocket dimensions that the ancient Magi left behind as a legacy, some even contained additional pockets of their own. This sort of layering was extremely difficult, as it was impossible to shift a dimension into another. Even though Leyland possessed quite a few spatial items, he was unable to place his storage ring into his storage pouch. But it was very obvious that the ancient Magi had methods to successfully break through this restriction, thus building this pocket dimension within a pocket dimension. This kind of pocket dimensions were known as cores. It required the huge affluence and power of the ancient Magi to be able to build such a core. And in this core were stored all kinds of resources, many of which would make Morning Star Magi turn green with envy. Since the Sun's Child was within the Quicksand organization, then their powers would be considered top-notch even in the ancient times. Such organizations would hence possess the ability to construct these. Leyland guessed, as such as he looked up at the entirety of Quicksand Castle, which was, in fact, an extraordinary pocket dimension. Chew. At this moment, the blood vulture with Leyland let out a harmonious hoot and descended into one of the huge caves. Bam. The carcass of the snake-necked turtle was thrown to the ground, following which the blood vulture started squawking. A few small pink blood vultures ran out from the cave, gnawing at the flesh. It was obvious these small blood vultures were only children. Not only were their bodies shades of pink, they were completely bald, having yet to grow feathers. They were similar in strength to level 3 acolytes. After these blood vultures grow into adulthood, they are able to reach the level of a rank 3 Magus. Furthermore, they are able to control bloodlines. Since they were capable of flight too, their eggs, if sold, would definitely be able to obtain a high price. Leyland looked at the baby blood vultures, which were as small as chicks, and thought that it was a pity. Since they were born, these blood vultures would only succumb to the first creature they saw after they exited their shells, and could never be tamed by anyone else. Taking advantage of the blood vultures eating the carcass, Leyland secretly exited the carcass of the snake-necked turtle and went to a corner of the cave. Shadow technique! Leyland used a complicated magic rune on himself. The darkness immediately shrouded him, and Leyland vanished into the shadows. The blood vultures were driving Leyland up the wall, and at the same time, Leyland felt a terrifying life force fluctuating from the centermost cave. That was definitely the king blood vulture, a peak rank 3 crystal phase creature. Under the detection of so many high-ranked creatures, his shadow stealth could not hold out for long, hence Leyland had used yet added another spell. The shadow technique was not exactly a spell but a special technique. When Leyland was in Twilight Zone, he had collected many rank 3 spell models. Even though the majority of them were flawed, there were still a few which were in good condition. So with these models as a starting point, he developed his own special technique that was compatible with shadow stealth. Amongst everything, many of the ancient records of the Dark Elves gave him a lot of insights in his development of the special technique. Shadow technique can be used on its own to hide the user's physical body, or can be used in combination with the rank 1 spell Shadow Stealth, increasing its strength, in which case the final strength will be similar to that of a rank 3 spell. It was very difficult to develop a rank 3 spell independently, but Leyland found Shadow Stealth an easy spell to cast. It was rare to come by such a combination of compatibility with both bloodline and aptitude. Hence, Leyland customized this shadow technique to amplify Shadow Stealth's ability, elevating it to rank 3 status. The combination of the Shadow Stealth and Shadow technique immediately produced a frightening end result. Leyland could clearly feel his own shadow being engulfed by a layer of dense darkness. He had been kept on edge before as he felt that he would be discovered any time, but now, those feelings of trepidation had completely disappeared. So, blood vultures do like metallic surroundings. This is something the books never mentioned. Leyland ignored the exchange of the family of blood vultures, and without consent, looked around the nest of the blood vulture. The cave was huge and gloomy, dimly lit, and had the foul smell of a certain creature. Of course, this didn't matter much to Leyland. Following the path to the bottom of the cave, Leyland saw a huge bird's nest made with chunks of gold. Beside it were multiple smaller nests weaved with other unknown golden stalks and roots, radiating a faint light. This is... Leyland walked closer and immediately widened his eyes as he was attracted to the objects inside the golden nest. Bloodline crystals, dragon root fruits, and dried-up bones of bloodline creatures. He was immediately able to recognize a few items. The Last Supper Leyland recognized a few items in the golden nest. First was a crimson gemstone. This was a bloodline crystal, a very precious material for warlocks. It could even slightly increase the purity of a bloodline. Though this was practically useless for giant Chemian serpent warlocks like Leyland, whose bloodline had been purified to the limit, it was definitely something that could cause most other warlocks to go all out. As long as news about bloodline crystals was spread, the two female warlocks, Freya and Miranda, would definitely pounce over like lunatics, willing to pay any price in order to obtain it. The dragon root fruit was also a very special plant, with a very durable outer layer that even surpassed the strength of Magus alloys. It could be preserved for over 100 years, and magi that ate it could increase the durability of their bodies. Rumors had it that there was a chance of inheriting a trace of a bloodline from within the fruit. This would mean the beginning of a warlock family. Of course, for Leyland and all the others who already had a bloodline, they could no longer change it. However, if traded outside, it would go for a sky-high price. Such a resource could not be measured by price and could be exchanged between Morningstar magi. The other few things included some skeletons that were each the size of a human femur and the remains of a powerful creature above rank 3. Even after so many years, there was no erosion, and he could still sense some remaining suppression from a bloodline. These remains were actually what were most useful to Leyland. The blood of most bloodline creatures came from the bones, and these specific remains came from powerful rank 3 creatures. With them on hand, he could refine an ancient bloodline out of it. Besides these few items, there were also other bloodline items within the little golden blood vulture nests. Even Leyland, who was very learned and had gathered a terrifying amount of knowledge, could not identify everything. There was no question that these were all bloodline items, and every single one was enough to make any warlock go crazy. I see. Leyland glanced at the pile of bloodline items, a look of understanding flashing in his eyes. It was obvious that the growth of a blood vulture was inseparable from these items. Though they could be used directly, long-term contact with them increased its rate of maturation. It could also increase its strength and awaken its mysterious bloodline ability. This was also why the blood vulture was so enthusiastic about gathering bloodline items. Glancing at all these, Leyland had to expend a lot of effort to suppress the desire within his body. Though these are good, they aren't as important as the lamia hair. Also, Leyland glanced towards the blood vulture outside the cave. He was currently in stealth, and with the added bonus from darkness techniques, he had not been discovered by the bird. Though shadow stealth was great, there was one flaw. If Leyland wanted to take these items away, he would need to dispel his shadow stealth. In that case, he would definitely be discovered the blood vulture, and the whole group might be attracted here. On top of that, with a terrifying king blood vulture, Leyland would need more than 9 lives to survive. This would definitely raise the guard of many other blood vultures, which would not be beneficial to Leyland's future plans. A regular blood vulture nest has so many great items inside. Within the king blood vulture's nest, there should be even better things. A fire began to blaze in Leyland's eyes. The place with the highest probability of having the lamia hair should be the king blood vulture's nest. Leyland immediately recalled the giant cave he had merely shot a glance at earlier, with very profound, horrifying energy waves hidden within. Looks like I'll be stuck here for a period of time. I'll have to find out the behavioral patterns of the blood vultures. Uncle, are you sure this is the place? Noah glanced at Robin, who was beside him. They were now in front of a large door, intricate and complicated patterns on the frame. The 3 remaining black Horal snake warlocks were like little followers as they gathered closely behind them. If we activate anything wrongly, we'll lose our way even more thoroughly and be stuck here till we die. Don't worry. Based on the information I received, it can't be wrong. Besides, that item is too important to us. Robin looked grim, yet there was a fiery look in his eyes. I need some time to confirm this. Have all the issues at the back been taken care of? Robin did not even turn back as he asked. I've already set up 5 spells of abduction, as well as created a body substitute. A sinister expression appeared on Noah's face. The moment they catch up to us, they will definitely be teleported to various areas within the maze and then be trapped in the boundless room till death. Barbarian bears are such stupid creatures. He spoke confidently. Boom. At this moment, a giant howl traveled from a short distance away, accompanied with the breaking of a spell formation and a roar. "Little worms, I've found you." Kacha. A pink crystal necklace was split open while Noah looked on in disbelief. Never underestimate your opponents. Robin's eyes were still fixed on the giant door, but his voice was transmitted over. They've only broken through our first defensive spell formation. We still have some time. Take care of the spell formations and try your best to buy me more time, Robin commanded, and the other 3 black Horal snake warlocks bowed, before leaving immediately. Rumbling sounds were heard constantly, and a large bear monster could vaguely be seen roaring in the spell formation, causing beads of cold sweat to roll down Noah's face. Kacha, kacha. Crystals shattered one after another, every time being followed by the voices of the subordinates. Second defensive spell formation destroyed. The main body of the defensive formation is damaged. We can hold for less than a minute. AAHHH, the short conversation ended, followed by the abrupt blood-curdling shrieks, signifying the end of these warlocks. Noah clenched his fists. All of them were from his family, but they had all fallen in this exploration. Now only he and his uncle were left. "I'll go and stall for more time," Noah exclaimed. "No need for that." Robin interrupted his words and, raising his finger, tapped on the door a few times. Using some strange rule, he drew a circle. A hum rang out as in an instant multiple water ripples appeared on the surface of the giant door. The tide surged and then rushed into a brass keyhole. Like a castle of blocks collapsing, the door rapidly broke apart into countless fragments, the 2 sides springing open and revealing a mystical luster within. "Wretched maggots, I'll tear you apart." Boom. With a loud sound, the last spell formation hindering the barbarian bear shaman shattered, revealing a giant barbarian bear with firm muscles all over. After seeing Robin, its eyes immediately turned red. "Don't mind it, let's enter." Robin pulled Noah through the door. "If you want revenge, then come in." The sound of Robin's taunts traveled over. "Ah!" Its eyes completely red, the barbarian bear shaman chased them in. Magnificent rays flashed, and the scene suddenly changed. By the time Noah came back to his senses, he was already sitting at a dining table. On the large white tablecloth was not even a speck of dust, while the silver lampstand had candles burning above it. After which, Noah found that he was unable to get up. Even the spiritual force and magic power that he had been so proud of as a rank 3 Magus could not be used at all. He looked towards his uncle, fear and terror apparent in his expression. At the other end of the table, the barbarian bear Magus was sitting in a daze. Though the muscles that were bulging displayed the fury of its owner, it could not move an inch. This is the Last Supper, which is the most impartial and bloody duel. Between us, only one side can live, while the loser shall lose everything and turn into the meal of the victor. In addition, the victor will even be awarded with the judge's horn. Robin said matter-of-factly, seemingly very familiar with all that was happening. The moment his words sounded, black figures suddenly appeared in seats that had initially been empty. There were no energy undulations from their bodies, their eyes completely red. For some reason, the moment he saw them, Noah felt cold sweat running down his back. He counted carefully. There were 13 seats at this long table, but there was one empty. "Now for the first dish, the Bloody Mary Desert." An indescribable voice resounded in Noah's mind, sending a shiver down his spine. What the hell is this? At another area in Quicksand Castle, Kesha was quickly fleeing along a corridor, a green-skinned barbarian with a strange appearance escaping shoulder to shoulder with her. These two were originally Hunter and the Hunted, but for some reason they had formed an alliance and were both looking pale in panic. "All offensive spells of the 4 great elements are useless against it. Try special attacks. I'll cover you." The green-skinned barbarian looked to be in pain as he flung a gemstone necklace behind him. Bang! Terrifyingly chilly air exploded, covering the ground with a layer of frost as numerous runic chains appeared. Crack! Crack! What followed was the sound of ice shattering and footsteps drawing closer. A black figure materialized from the icy mist. It was a monster that looked like a middle-aged man wearing a trench coat. He donned a hood, and it was hard to tell what he looked like. The fingers on his 2 palms had disappeared, and in place of them were many scissors that were glinting with light. The numerous runic chains did not stand a chance against the man's scissors, and were easily snipped at and broken. Eye of Petrification! Many crimson runes appeared on Kesha's body as she bit her finger and drew a strange rune on her forehead. Following that, her eyes turned into a pair of amber vertical pupils. With the amplification from the blood rune, her innate spell had reached a frightful degree of power. A circle of petrification began to spread with Kesha at its center. Spirit body in the face of the Eye of Petrification, the man in the trench coat suddenly froze, and an ash-gray coat of stone formed across the surface of his body. Ka-cha! Ka-cha! His entire being turned into a giant statue, and particles of dust fell endlessly from him. Icy blades! Under the manipulation of the green-skinned barbarian, numerous blades formed a tornado, enclosing the statue within as eerie noises rang constantly. Moments later, the blades dispersed, and the statue that once stood there had vanished, leaving behind a bed of fragmented rocks. It's finally over. The green-skinned barbarian heaved a sigh of relief. No, not yet. Kesha laughed bitterly instead. Soon after, to his terror, the green-skinned barbarian saw the fragmented rocks explode, exposing pieces of flesh within. Many of them grew tentacles and started amalgamating to reform the man in the black trench coat from before. Even a single tear could not be seen on his clothes. Goddamn it, the green-skinned barbarian cursed. Where in the world did you infuriate this darned thing? Not only is it immune to spells, even physical attacks are useless. I have no idea. Kesha's face spelled despair. After entering Quicksand Castle, she had only charged through a few levels before the man in the black trench coat set his sights on her. With her subordinates being lost one by one, the current situation seemed to bode ill. Under the immense threat of death, the last green-skinned barbarian in pursuit was compelled to join forces with Kesha to defeat this creature together. But by the looks of it, they were at their wits' end. Chirp, chirp, a piercing sound sliced through the air. Violent whirls of wind were brought about as the earth was engulfed in darkness and shadows. With a wingspread wide enough to envelop the land in darkness, a blood vulture descended in the heart of an enormous mountain range that bore the appearance of a honeycomb, landing in the highest and largest cave. Somewhere in the mountains, Leyland's eyes sparkled with a blue glint. Left at 4:47 p.m. and returned again after an interval of 23 minutes and 45 seconds. He was currently recording the King Blood Vulture's travel statistics with great detail. Over the past few days of observation, he had managed to reap some returns. This King Blood Vulture had at least the strength of the crystal phase. The bulky physique of the creature and the terrifying spiritual force on it was sufficient to completely destroy Leyland's plans of seizing anything. Besides, the King Blood Vulture had no need to leave its nest to hunt. It received sacrifices from the entire pack of blood vultures. Every day, numerous blood vultures would return with food and deliver them into the cave. Hence, it rarely left the cave throughout the day, unlike the average blood vulture Leyland had seen earlier, which usually spent half its day flying around outside. However, every afternoon, at this particular time of the day, the King Blood Vulture would leave the cave for a period of time, likely to patrol its territory. This was the very chance that Leyland had been waiting for. The Blood Vulture is indeed a creature from the ancient era, gifted with the bizarre ability to sense any bloodline treasures, Leyland exclaimed. Apart from the King Blood Vulture's cave, which he had not dared to pry into, he had explored the lairs of the other average blood vultures and discovered many bloodline treasures which would be useful to warlocks. The accumulated value of these items were enough to make even Duke Gilbert lose his mind. Everything will hinge on tomorrow. Leyland watched the cave at the highest point with caution and slipped into the darkness. The next day in the afternoon, following a cry, the gigantic King Blood Vulture stepped out of its cave once again, casting a shadow upon the earth. Terrifying vibrations swept the area, intimidating the other formidable creatures that watched over the region. The time is now. Leyland's glance froze. Shadow stealth. Darkness technique. In a split second, his physical being vanished and was concealed within the shadows, surrounded by thick fog. With the help of the concealing effects of the spell, Leyland fumbled his way to the cave right into the central cave. The King Blood Vulture's lair is guarded by 2 blood vultures that are already at the hydro phase. Whenever the King Blood Vulture is out on patrol, They are responsible for guarding his lair. Leyland crawled onto the protruding top of a black rock and watched the two huge blood-red silhouettes in the cave closely. He furrowed his brows. According to my current abilities, I might barely be able to handle a single blood vulture at the hydro phase, but it would definitely cause a ruckus. There's a high possibility that the entire pack might surround and annihilate me, or that the king blood vulture might even return unexpectedly. Leyland took a glance at the silhouettes of the two guards, gritted his teeth, and passed through to the other side while hidden. Two blood vultures at the hydro phase would be too much for him to handle with his current abilities, but the detection abilities of the powerful creatures might not be as acute as that of a human Magus. This was his chance. Having already wasted too much time here, Leyland did not dare to continue waiting. Even if it was risky, he wanted to give it a try. In the shadows, everything outside was overcast. It was as if the world had been soaked in thick glue, and every step he took, Leyland had to expend a great amount of energy and magic power, while at the same time taking note of how the two blood vulture guards reacted, making it a terribly tiring job for him. Just when Leyland carefully arrived at the entrance and was about to walk past one of the blood vulture guards, chirp, chirp! The guard seemed to have discovered something and became alert, glancing around its surroundings with vigilance. Even for a powerful creature, once it has passed rank 3, no matter how dumb it was originally, it would evolve to have the intelligence of a human, Leyland exclaimed. He immediately commanded in his head, AI chip, begin the plan B. Beep. Command received. Starting plan B. The chip responded faithfully. At the halfway mark of the mountain, a miniature model of a spell formation suddenly exploded, revealing a shadow servant within. The shadow servant zoomed into a cave that was guarded by an adolescent blood vulture and grabbed a few pieces of bloodline crystals before escaping swiftly. Chirp, chirp! The blood vultures were left enraged, and numerous blood-red figures flew out too, circling in the sky. Before the shadow servant could run out of the perimeter of the huge mountain, it was torn to pieces by the explosive might of the blood vultures. Although the two blood vulture guards did not take action, their attention was obviously taken away by the scene there. Seizing the chance, Leyland immediately took out a black crown. This crown was very small and exquisite, and the design was not too flamboyant, as though it was specially made for females. Dark Elven Crown! This was Leyland's war trophy. After completely defeating the Dark Elves, they who submitted to him offered the crown along with their powerful meditation techniques. This crown was also the first magic equipment that Leyland had obtained, and was at a higher rank than his meteor sword. The Dark Elven Crown was a sacred legendary weapon, which possessed the strong ability to mask auras. The then Queen of the Dark Elves, Anya, used it to enter the core of Central Twilight Zone in a single motion. If not for Leyland's secret interference, she might have emerged victorious over the humans and unified the entirety of Twilight Zone. As a piece of magic equipment, the Dark Elven Crown had no doubt a hidden function, but as it had been used once recently, it took decades for it to be available for use again. After getting hold of this magic equipum, Leyland had been constantly analyzing it using the AI chip, and had learnt many useful techniques and spells. What made him especially interested was that the AI chip could forcefully stimulate a portion of the functions of the Dark Elven Crown when charged with a certain amount of magic crystals. Although it only possessed a portion of its full powers, the Dark Elven Crown was still a piece of magic equipment. Its effect was limited only to Leyland himself. The scary thing was that it could even escape the perception of a Morning Star Magus. This went without saying for the two blood vulture guards. With the shadow servant outside holding their attention, along with the protection of the crown of the Dark Elves, Leyland successfully infiltrated the lair of the king blood vulture. Although the lighting in the cave was poor, it did not pose a problem to Leyland. The floor was covered in dark red blood stains and the remains of other creatures which had varying degrees of decomposition, likely the food that the king blood vulture had consumed recently. The entire cave felt eerie to Leyland, as though he was being watched closely by something. Leyland reached out his hand and felt the wall, which was black and studded with metal grains. When his hand came into contact with the black wall, countless tentacles extended from above, but were quickly burnt his black flames. By the looks of it, this pack of blood vultures has been living here for a long time. Even the mountains have been affected by the radiation and have come to life, Leyland exclaimed. Such materials that had been given life were very precious. Not only could they be added to self-defense spells, they could also confer the ability to heal oneself. Architecture that was built mainly with these materials usually could last for more than 1,000 years without collapsing. If such materials could be added to Leyland's Magus Tower, its degree of stability would definitely go up a notch. What a pity that plans to exploit this area would certainly be too unrealistic. Leyland continued walking deeper and deeper until he reached the end of the cave, where laid a gigantic blood vulture nest. Gold animal fur and the metal itself were laid out to form a sturdy mat, upon which there was a depression from years of use. Yet there wasn't a single thing on the mat. Leyland was shocked, but followed with a bitter laugh. The bloodline items are only effective for the young of the blood vultures. It looks like the king blood vulture hasn't laid any eggs, so naturally there would be no need to collect these items. I have to evacuate as soon as possible and ransack all the other blood vulture lairs before that. Leyland was determined. He made a prompt decision on the spot. If there weren't any new discoveries, he would choose to leave immediately and hardly did a sloppy job. Who would have thought that I would meet a comrade here? An exclamation sounded from a distance, causing Leyland to freeze in his steps. He turned and firmly stared at a corner. There, an illusory figure slowly came into view. A soul! No, an even more powerful being. Leyland watched the figure that had suddenly appeared, as though he was about to face an enemy. Activation, the illusion that surfaced was that of an astonishingly beautiful young woman. Her hair was like a sea of emerald green with light curls, flying in the wind like it had a life of its own. She possessed a pair of mesmerizing eyes, coupled with a delicate yet puzzling charm to her face. To Leyland's surprise, she gave him a baffling sense of familiarity. Especially after the complete materialization of the illusion, Leyland's blood vessels generated a sense of fear, as if he had met a natural enemy. Yet he felt an amiability within her that tempted him to throw himself into the arms of the woman regardless of everything. Lamia! There were agony and bitterness in Leyland's tone. From how called out to him just now, he managed to guess some things. The similarity in temperament and looks between her and the snake dowager was especially striking. The Lamia shared the same bloodline as the snake dowager. In fact, it had an even more direct line of descent compared to the giant Chemian serpent. Thus, on the whole, they could be considered siblings with blood relations. "My brother, tell me, why are you here? What are you looking for?" the green-haired Lamia asked, her voice strangely charming, compelling him to answer. Warning, warning. Instability detected in host bloodline, possibility of an emotional outburst. The AI chip sounded the reminder, snapping Leyland out from the confusion he was in. This made him unwilling to look at the opposity party, particularly at the Lamia's eyes. Rumor has it that the ancient Lamia has the ability to manipulate any kind of snake she desires. It seems like this is true indeed. It was merely a remnant soul, yet it almost got to Leyland. If the Lamia were to be at the Morning Star realm, Leyland was afraid he might have to bow down to her. "Your bloodline, it seems to be extremely pure, and you have a special power enveloping your whole body." The virtual image of the Lamia bit her finger. "Who are you, really?" Leyland spoke in a deep tone. "I was a human once. I had a few names, but I have forgotten them all." The virtual image smiled, as if she was narrating a story unrelated to her. "Are you the soul of the ancient Lamia Warlock?" Leyland made a guess. According to his intelligence, the ancient quicksand organization once had a Lamia Warlock, and apparently after her atavism, she became a true Lamia possessing terrifying power that even average radiant moon magi could not match. No. She had perished completely. I'm just a phantom image formed by the scattered fragments of memories that have evolved together after a very long period of time. A sense of loneliness could be felt from the green-haired woman's face. "Even so, for your soul to take such shape, I am sure there is a source of radiation nearby." Leyland's eyes lit up and he reached out and grabbed at the fur cushion. Huge black claws appeared, splitting the fur and metal within and revealing what was underneath the surface. It was a layer of white fur. Brush that aside, and immediately a rich and heavy scent of undulating bloodlines spread it out. You can even resist the radiation undulation and the aura of the bloodline. Leyland kept the white feathers in a flash, and thereafter eyed the hollow area intensely. It was the broken section of a bone. It must have been a part of some bloodline creature. Although it might have been a long time ago, the horrifying threat and undulations emitting from the bone made Leyland have an impulse to kneel down. You are truly the adult form of a rank 5 bloodline creature. Even though it is a broken section of a bone, it could still radiate even after your death. Moreover, you can induce such a thing. Leyland looked at the green-haired Lamia in amazement. For blood vultures, the remains of a rank 5 bloodline creature was a precious item to that was dearly cherished. No wonder the blood vulture had safeguarded it under so many layers, even going so far as to mask its energy with the feather. "What do you intend to do here, my brother?" she asked again. Leyland muttered under his breath and finally replied, "I want to acquire something that will speed up the maturation of my bloodline, for instance Lamia hair or some such thing. Compared to Lamia hair, this can help you more." The snake woman smiled, and the broken bone was flung out and landed on Leyland's hand. Why are you helping me?" Feeling the ecstatic joy boiling in his bloodline, Leyland knew the broken Lamia bone in his hands were the real deal. He could already feel the transcendence. However, he did not immediately accept it and instead asked some questions. "I have been in existence for far too long. It might be a few hundred years or even thousands. I can never leave the designated finger bones radiation area." The Lamia shot a glance at Leyland. "Do you know how it feels?" Leyland fell silent. Such pain, it did indeed have the ability to drive a Magus crazy to the verge of seeking death. "If you take the finger bone, there will be a shortage of such a radiation environment, and I will gradually fade away." The young woman's silhouette became more and more illusionary with a smile of relief on her face. "Wait, how can I resolve the shackles on the giant Chem-In serpent Warlock bloodline?" Watching the young woman's illusionary image gradually fading out until the wall behind her could be seen, Leyland quickly blurted out the question. "This problem can only be solved by the Grand Matriarch." Accompanying the fading image, the snake woman's grew softer and softer until she dissipated into thin air. "Grand Matriarch, Snake Dowager." Leyland stroked the finger bone he was holding in his hands, his face a sea of infinite obscurity. "Regardless of that, I better make a move fast." With lightning speed, Leyland kept the finger bone well, swept his eyes over the surroundings, and launched the dark elven crown. Thick, black darkness enveloped Leyland completely, and coupled with his magic power he was able to pass through the gate which was guarded by the 2 blood vultures unharmed. After he reached the foot of the mountain, Leyland looked back at the huge black form of the mountain and its innumerable caves. He looked hesitant. This was practically a warlock's treasure trove, but without a strength at the Morning Star realm, there was no way the entirety of the blood vulture could be subdued. "I have, at most, 5 more minutes before the king blood vulture is back from his patrol. When he realizes that the finger bone is gone, I am sure he will definitely launch an investigation into the matter." Leyland stroked his chin. He had been hiding up here for so long, the backup plans had to be more than these. But now the biggest harvest was already in his hand. Whether to continue or not, he had not yet made up his mind. Since ancient times, it was a common occurrence for an individual to place himself in danger for personal benefits. Leyland did not want to become one of them. "Forget it, let's go." With some regret, Leyland turned his head and left the place. You are finally out." Not too far away, a temporary underground cave opened up. A female Magus in pursuit ran in with a crystal ball in her hand. On the surface of the crystal ball, a blood-red layer appeared, getting brighter and brighter. "If you had kept hiding in the nest of the blood vultures, I might not have been able to find you. But what about now?" The female Magus flashed a smile. She was in pursuit of Leyland all the way and had even used a spell to use a trace of Leyland's energy to build a tracking item. But after reaching this place, she realized Leyland had hidden in the nest of the blood vultures. The king blood vulture there was at the peak of the crystal phase. Other than that, there was a big group of rank 3 followers. If she chased in after Leyland and a commotion was created, it would definitely alert the many blood vultures to join in for the kill. Therefore, this female Magus chose to hibernate and wait. To her, Leyland would come for collection of resources. It was just a matter of time. As long as she waited with patience, regardless of success or failure, he would leave and an opportunity would present itself. "All thanks to you, I was able to discover this treasure place. In return, I shall grant you a quick death." The female Magus shook her robes and immediately disappeared underground. Beep. Warning, warning. High-energy force field undulations detected. Distance 15 kilometers away, approaching quickly. The AI chip gave out this sudden warning, shocking Leyland. This was the advantage of having the AI chip. Not only did Leyland possess the Magus, special abilities of consciousness scanning, he also had the AI chip for exploration, probing and throwing necessary warnings. Moreover, the range of probing by the AI chip was much wider compared to Leyland's own ability. "Begin imaging!" Leyland gave the order immediately. Soon after, a red-hued motion picture was sent in front of him. It was an image of a living creature. There were only heat and radiation readings without any signs of the gender, however the bright colors were a giveaway. It was a rank 3 Magus, one that had attained the crystal phase. "Ah, the pursuers are finally here." Leyland had expected this would happen. Hoot! At this moment from a distance, a high-pitched sound pierced forth, turning Leyland's face pale white. "The King Blood Vulture is back. If I turn back now, all that awaits me is death." As it is, at this point in time, Leyland curled his lips into a smile and commanded his AI chip. "AI chip, prepare to activate all programs." Command received. Activated. The AI chip alerted without any emotion. Hoot! Immediately after the King Blood Vulture had entered its cave in the mountain, a violent cry rang out. 2 hydrophase blood vultures were pinned to the ground by its claw. Feathers and blood were smeared all over the ground. The King Blood Vulture snarled, creating a whole world of uproar in the Blood Vulture's mountain. But that was not all. Bang, bang, bang. Following Leyland's order, in a secret corner of the Blood Vulture's mountain, hidden spells were activated in series. One after another, shadow servants manifested themselves at lightning speed, so much so that they appeared right next to the Blood Vulture's nests. They grasped at many of the bloodline treasures, with some even clasping onto huge Blood Vulture eggs, fleeing the grounds. Basically, except for the area around the King Blood Vulture's cave, the rest of the mountain in its entirety was under attack. There were at least 50 such spells placed. Corresponding with the loud snarl of the King Blood Vulture, multiple shadows of darkness bore through to the center of it all, and immediately the whole of the Blood Vulture's mountain became a huge field of upheaval.